As a child, I often fell into movies that replaced idle time with adventure and meaning. At least the time I spent watching them meant something to me. I mean, who wouldn't lose themselves in plots that seemed far from their reach, yet their meaning could reach deep within their imagination, as well as their ability to relate to a character or two. You see, my father and mother were young when they married and left the nest, but they managed to create a good living from scratch. You see, my father was a young man with very little education. My mother, on the other hand, was a disabled young woman who graduated on the National Honor Society. They obtained a house in the suburbs, 2 cars, and had a son later. The plot twist came at a time where I can remember 1 minute run into my father's hands while he was getting off of work, to my mother feeding our wood stove that kept our house warm, and his hands no longer available. I don't know for sure why his hands were not there, but then again, maybe it's not meant for me to know, since their relationship began and ended before I could witness. At the age of 9 in the year 1986, my stepfather introduced to me a few movies that may have been age appropriate. Who knows? One of my favorite movies is Back to the Future. Since he was into technology, he would always have the latest gadget. I noticed that the video camera Doc Brown held was the same video camera we used to watch that movie. I mean, who wouldn't bust a gut watching the scene where Marty McFly's father cackled at a rerun, sporting his outdated slick back, eating a bowl of cereal for dinner? His father, though well loved by the family, at that point never seemed to gain his full potential, and a talent that only his son would know after traveling back in time. The interesting thing about this part of the story is not only did Marty's father's future take a turn, but his whole family was affected. While they were not in the worst of conditions, they were not in the best. He was not at his best. Therefore, his family was not in their best condition. To that, I can relate. In the 5th grade, I found a talent that I didn't know existed through a teacher who loved her profession. I noticed how my talent was similar to the talent of Marty's father. However, I do not liken myself to his father, but I can tell you that any talent can either encourage confidence or discourage it. I'm not sure what my father's talent was, but I don't think he fully developed it nor used it. Interesting enough, I noticed that in the story, Marty was driven to use his talent as I am driven to use mine. My relationship with my mother was close. There was a closeness most people feel when they must rely on each other for survival. But even in our closeness, there were times when my father's shadow cascaded over me. You'd be surprised on how much someone's idea of you can be affected by the parents you are reared by. That too is factored in the Back to the Future trilogy. When Marty was approached by his principal, the principal's disdain for him seemed to have more to do with who his father was, rather than who he was. Who I was to someone was never my care until it became apparent that I am my parents. I was my father. I was a man who I only knew in absence. At least that was everyone else's sentiment. My talent became my introduction to self-awareness. That self-awareness came with self-confidence. The only issue I had was relationships. My goal was to be married, have children, and teach them what wasn't taught to me. From trial after trial, obstacle after obstacle, I understood myself better. I also began to trust in God more. My trust and faith brought me through times even my movie nights did not. But as I began to show more and more progress in my life, I began to hear stories about my father in a light that was previously omitted. While it would seem that my approval rating would increase, I still didn't see the change in the way some people responded to me. What finally hit me was the fact that because Marty's father missed his chance to be his greatest self, his son now took on a role with his drive to use his God-given talent, all the while changing the course of his family, one generation at a time. As I continue toward my future, though rocky and uncertain, through trial and error, through sheer blessing, I can say, through it all, I am blessed to be married with children, and I'm learning each day that they are a better version of me. Though still young, they remind me that no matter what our past is, our will to be better creates a better future for not just ourselves, but also our entire family of one generation at a time.